Welcome to the Sur-thrival Guide podcast, a short series of daily impactful episodes full of ideas and tips on how to thrive in survival mode during the corona crisis. Every weekday, with the help of a special guest expert, we'll be exploring different tools to add to your Sur-thrival toolkit. So strap yourselves in and get ready to be inspired as we show you the way to Sur-thrival. Welcome everybody to the Sur-thrival Guide podcast. I'm Mark Stabina, former professional rugby player and now leadership consultant with Winning EQ. And I've created this podcast as a way to bring to life the ebook that I've recently published called the Sur-thrival Guide, of course. There it is. If you haven't got your copy, go ahead and download it immediately. It's free. The link should be there for you, or just go to winningeq.com and please pass it on as a gift to friends, family, work colleagues, just anybody really that's looking for some guidance and a little lift right now, which I think is pretty much all of us. Well, it's also a way to adopt a thrive mindset. There's tips and ideas in the guide to do that, and looking at all areas of your life as well. And one area in particular that is so important and extremely challenged during this pandemic is that of human connection and relationships in particular. And to say that I have an expert with us today on that topic is an understatement. Our special guest is an award-winning radio and TV journalist. She was Time Magazine Person of the Year in 2017. How many of us can say that? She is the host of the wildly popular podcast Mating Matters, one of my favorites as well. And she's also an evolutionary psychologist, which again is one of the main reasons we have her here today to talk about human connection and relationships. We are extremely fortunate to have Dr. Wendy Walsh. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have limited time. You're about to jump off after this and go and correspond with CNN. So it's so great to have you.
Nice to see you again.
Yes, thank you.
Wow.
One of my Yog Talks speakers blew the crowd away with your knowledge and just your take on pretty much just humans, which is what we're here to talk about today during the pandemic. And I just listened to your quarantine episode as well, which is perfect because that's pretty much what I want to talk about today. Before we do, evolutionary psychology. How'd you get into that? Why?
Well, my PhD is actually in clinical psychology, but very early on in my studies, I gravitated towards this idea that so much of who we are is the result of DNA that has spent, hundreds of thousands of years adapting to environmental conditions. And so many of our behaviors today that we think are very modern are no different from our hunter-gatherer ancestors. And in fact, I believe that psychological health comes when we just sort of understand what we're wired for. And more than anything, we're wired to bond, we're wired to reproduce. Despite what Darwin said, that it is survival of the fittest, it doesn't matter how fit you are and how well suited your cave was way back then, maybe lined in furs, or how many great meat you ate and caught because you were a great hunter. If you were not able to pass your genes through another woman into the next generation, you fell out of evolution's chain. So almost every human behavior that we have evolved to have is related to some form of reproductive strategy. So they call it sexual selection, so that I'm just obsessed with the science of love because it's an ancient science and it's the basic science of human behavior.
I really love that, and that is a feature of Mating Matters when I listen to all the episodes, is because it has that underlying evolutionary, the way we're wired, right? And our behaviors stemming back hundreds, thousands of years. And that's a great way for us to develop self-awareness, is to have, when we can attribute our behaviors today to the way that we're wired and our ancestors, it really helps, I guess, take control over that. But again, I want to speak less so that you can speak more. I also, and our viewers and our listeners would probably love to hear what a typical day looks like in lockdown for Dr. Wendy Walsh. typical day? I know every day is different for you.
Well, during quarantine, it is a very strange environment for everybody. I am quarantined with my 16-year-old daughter and my 21-year-old daughter, who was, I think, one of the first universities to shut down was Harvard. So she came home for what was supposed to be spring break and never left. And she basically had 48 hours to pack up her life and, excuse me, plan for graduation not to happen and convert to classes on Zoom. And then I have a 16-year-old who's trying to do high school on Zoom. And at the same time, I'm teaching about 80 students at Cal State Channel Island on Zoom. So basically our day is one of taking laptops to different parts of the house to try to get peace and quiet while our various classes are taking place. Because so many of us have quarantine brain and it's harder to keep a schedule, I have learned that depending on my iPhone doesn't work as well. And every day I write out what I have to do. Now, I want to say this because I think this is really, really important. I also think that so many people are hearing people like me talk about structure and talk about organization and talk about to-do lists. And for many people, this sets them up for failure. It sets off negative voices in their head saying, well, if she's doing it, I must be failing quarantine. So I want to sort of pull everybody off the guilt train and let you know that most of us aren't getting most of our to-do lists done. And sometimes as a reaction to the depression or anxiety, if you want to just clean out the garage for 3 days, go for it. If you want to binge watch something on Netflix, go for it. Your brain right now is responding to trauma. And it cannot solve this problem, right? There are two ways we cope with stress. One is to solve the problems around us, so to reduce the stressors. And the other is, we call it emotion-focused coping, where we focus on modulating our own feelings about things so that we can tolerate those external stressors. And I think you will drive yourself crazy if you think there's anything you can do to fix this right now. So if you need to lay low, that's your brain healing itself during this time. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to get too much done.
Thank you for saying that, because yeah, you're right. I mean, I work with companies. I'm doing a lot of research with regards to adapting to the new normal, and a lot of the research and the studies and the tips around, continuing the way you would normally in business, for example, is you get up, make sure, and I talk about the importance of a morning routine to set your day up for a win, just getting all the systems going and kickstart your day. But suggestions of, wear what you normally would wear online. If you have a meeting, make sure, and I see the merit in that, so that it's like we're in the same mode. But again, it's not the same. So that's what I'm hearing you say is this is a new environment, so adapt to the best of your ability and what feels. Here's an opportunity to feel comfortable. I'm not wearing pants right now, Wendy. So and I feel very relaxed.
That's a wonderful thought. You know what? I want to remind people that even during the best of times, when the economy's booming and the weather's great and and all the tummies are full and there are no food lines, even during the best of times, 1 in 6 Americans will suffer a bout of clinical depression. That means depression that lasts at least 2 weeks or more. So now we have environmental stressors that are causing almost the entire population to suffer from depression, and it may vacillate. You might find good days, bad days. You might find a day that starts out great. Like you said, you get up, do your routine, you even get dressed, and then it all falls apart by mid-afternoon because of some other emails came in that you're attending to and you never got to your to-do list, or you have children at home that need to be homeschooled because some teacher has told you, why aren't they getting their work done? And all of a sudden you're pulled off your real job to be a homeschool teacher. So I think we need to really cut ourselves some slack and also understand that our brains, we took over the planet. Homo sapiens took over the planet when we were certainly not the top of the food chain. For one reason. We have unique brains that are able to adapt to new environmental challenges very quickly. You saw those restaurants pivot and immediately do takeout service. You saw those gyms start to sell online memberships and having instructors come into your home through your computer. This is adaptation, and it's happening at a quick pace. But keep in mind, for your own life and things that you can't change and control, if you don't have a restaurant that you can convert into takeout, there may not be a problem to solve. And so instead, the game should be about acceptance, waiting, modulating your emotions, reducing your emotional feelings of stress. And yes, the other thing we're really good at is social connection. I like to say we are many one brain. Humans do not do well in isolation. So it's really important that people reach out to others using technology as much as possible.
So Wendy, on that point, that perfectly segues us into, well, essentially what we're talking about today. This crisis is putting immense strain and challenges on our social connection, our human connection, and in particular our relationships. So what are some of the challenges that you're seeing? Firstly, just generally speaking, connecting with other people and the importance of human connection, especially from an evolutionary standpoint. And then we'll get into relationships in general, particularly intimate relationships during quarantine.
Well, before I talk about relationships today, we should understand what is natural for our species. We roamed in packs of 35 to 40 mostly related family members, and we were constantly moving. We probably walked 10 to 12 miles a day, sometimes carrying babies and heavy packs of roots, nuts, and animals we caught along the way. We had lots of childcare around because these were multi-generational cooperative breeders. Not that parents didn't know that they were the parents, and certainly were the primary secure attachments for kids, but kids had multiple attachments. And this is where we learn to function as many one brain. We shared the intelligence with each other. We consoled each other. We loved each other. Now, we were never meant to live in an isolated nuclear family. That's a modern invention that came after really towards farming, and then really solidified in the Industrial Revolution when gender roles became so distinct. And so in some ways, our modern society before quarantine was reverting back to something more natural for our species. You might look at it as far more babies born out of wedlock, too many single parents. What about these same-sex families? And I say, this is what always existed, right? We always had gay brothers and sisters helping us with our kids, and that's how they nurtured their own genes and their nieces and nephews. We had some men who were great fathers and very involved, and we had others who were the big hunter full of testosterone who'd come in and drop some seeds and leave and go on to the next tribe. We have everything today. What we don't have today are the village supports that we might have had in our hunter-gatherer tribe. All the intergenerational family members helping with childcare. And of course, my hope is that in the future, we will structure it so that governments provide, or workplaces provide, that kind of childcare. So what we didn't have is a nuclear family left alone in the suburbs in a house to battle it out for survival. And we certainly didn't have them living in one house under quarantine where no parent could even leave for work. So this is not normal for our brain. There's nothing evolutionary about this. However, I should say that pandemics or epidemics did happen, of course, throughout the history of our species. So we evolved to have a kind of psychological immune system, which is, oh, that person from that tribe over there might be dangerous. I heard they got sick over at that tribe. Stay away from them. So sadly, one of our natural reflexes during pandemics is to actually breed some distrust of people who are different. And that's why you're seeing these terrible stories about racism, rising of racism because of COVID-19. So what I want to say is, this is temporary. It's not normal. The biggest struggle is that when you're living in a house with people you're quarantined with, even if it's somebody you love dearly and you promise till death do we part, you are not seeing the same person you married. You are seeing a person under stress. Some people have reported to me that they finally see the deep, deep value in their spouse or their partner, that their partner is so calm in the face of adversity, or such a good problem solver, or such a good shoulder to lean on. Others have told me, oh my gosh, this is not the person I signed up for. They've lost their mind. And so even though there's this saying, adversity doesn't breed character, it reveals character. I totally don't agree with that. All adversity does is show you somebody's coping strategies under great stress. And this is not how they're going to be forever. So I want you to remind yourself of that. Did I answer your question? You asked me about the biggest stressors, right?
Yeah, I mean, connection, thank you, connection wise, but then now we're getting into relationships. So you mentioned what I heard then were couples under quarantine living together. So some of the challenges of that, if we can talk, because I know you have lots to say about this, especially everybody go to her podcast, Mating Matters, the most recent episode in particular. Provides some great tips. I'm going to ask Wendy to share some of those as well. But there's different situations for different couples. There's obviously singles, single people in quarantine. You spoke into couples that are together, the different situations that might arise. Some of them come together even more and they see the true value of, especially with their coping strategies. Some are driving each other nuts. Now there's others like myself who are separated from their partner. My girlfriend's on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast with her family, and she has been for 2 months. So there's another element to quarantine where we talk about connection. Physical connection is very important to me, but the opportunity in that is finding ways to connect that doesn't rely on the physical, finding other ways to deeply connect with my partner due to the isolation and not being able to do it physically. So can you speak more about that to the people that are separated, to people that aren't in relationship, that are potentially trying to date right now during this period?
Okay, two different questions. So let me start with your conundrum. So people who are in dating relationships and do not live together and can't physically see each other during this time, especially if they've had to scatter to different cities. This is really, really stressful. But like every problem in life, we have to sort of reframe it as this is an opportunity to really grow some emotional intimacy with my partner. This is a time for us to have long, lingering phone conversations that we might not normally have time for when we're really, really busy, right? I don't want to dismiss the fact that when human bodies touch and we have skin-to-skin contact, a host of neurohormones are released, a cocktail of hormones that feels so delicious, not just sexual arousal hormones, but also just hugging and touching and holding hands lowers your cortisol level, your stress hormone. You get nice hits of dopamine and oxytocin, those feel-good cuddle hormones, right, that help you feel connected. So,
Stop it, Wendy, stop rubbing it in.
However, our brains are magical things. And I don't have to really be explicit to tell people that it is possible to actually create hormonal surges with your eyes closed while you're alone, while you're maybe talking on phone with your other partner, because the two of you can go into a romantic fantasy world where you do have a level of connection through the spoken word. And there are ways that you can mutually exchange a kind of love and connection that way. And I think that it's important that couples not be shy about doing that. I'm not a big believer that you should ever try that on Skype or Zoom, though, and add the visual component, because I don't trust the internet and all the bombers out there. Trust me. But I do think that it's also an opportunity to really connect with your partner verbally and really talk about goals. Now, what holds humans together during times of crisis? It's always hope. We're survivalists at heart. It's always the future. My favorite conversations these days with friends or my kids is, when this is over, what are we going to do? And there are some things about this quarantine I want to keep, actually. More home cooking, more family dinner time, and also the knowledge. A friend of mine said the other day, I am never going to complain about having to get in the car and drive to go meet friends for dinner ever again. I'm going to feel so grateful sitting with friends in a restaurant. If we ever get back into restaurants, who knows? So thinking about the gratefulness. Okay, so that's answering your question about how you do it alone. Now, what about the people who literally are single? Now, dating apps traffic has gone way up because what do people do that we know? Isolation is not good for our mental health. In fact, there's been a movement on long ago to eliminate solitary confinement from our penal system because it causes such grave mental illness. We know this is the worst torture you can do to a human. So it makes sense that people are going to be reaching out on these dating apps. But I want to remind everybody that to not focus on texting a million different people, pick one, focus on it for a while. If you don't feel good about it, then move on, because we do suffer from something called a paradox of choice. The more choice we have, the less likely we are to make a choice. And if we do make a choice, we're less likely to value that choice because we're always thinking about the bigger, better deal. I think this might be a really unique time to find a long-term mate because you don't have sort of the pressure of turning it into a physical relationship right away. And you have the time to build emotional intimacy, which ultimately becomes the glue in long-term monogamy. I mean, I can just ask you, Mark, you've been with your partner for 2 years now, did you tell me?
2 years, yes.
2 years. So do you think the reason why you don't go looking for a good mate is because 2 years into it, the sex is that great? Or is it because she knows you and you trust her?
Wow, I didn't expect to be answering the questions here, Wendy. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the latter, there's a number of reasons, especially going into this 43 years of age. So I've had, time to kind of emotionally mature and see what works in relationships and have experiences in different relationships. And I know that this time in my life in particular, I can just speak for myself, that I was seeking that one partner that I could connect with emotionally as well and be more open to that and step into a loving relationship with both feet, right, and committed. So there's that element as well. Very soon after I'd committed in myself to do that, she showed up, and I believe in that, and she was in the same boat. So already the way that started, we talk about it, we agree upon that we were both in that frame of mind and that mindset, and that's worth nurturing. That is, in my experience, that is rare. And is it perfect? No. But what I'm also valuing is that we both acknowledge and value the work that it takes. And every time we work through a bump or something, we actually form a stronger bond.
Of course. Remember, the road to intimacy is paved with ruptures followed by repairs.
Yeah.
So it's like we're always in our relationships working together to fill the potholes with asphalt so that we can smoothly sail along again. And relationships are a gymnasium for the mind. People who are alone say, well, I'm going to find myself and heal and become a better person by myself. And I'm going to sit on a mountain, I'm going to meditate, or I'm going to not date for a year, and all these tricks that people try to find. That's not actually growing, that's avoiding, right? And so you have to be in it, and you have to be as conscious as possible about your motivations. And I don't know if you've ever heard this saying that in a bad relationship where people still stay together, it's usually made up of about 90% sex. And in a good relationship where people still stay together, it's made up of about 10% sex. Right? So in the end of the day, it's the emotional connection, which is why people stay together. And also, the way love hits your brain, it hits the same brain centers as a drug. And exactly like a drug, when you first fall in love, it is a high. You can see no wrong in your partner. You feel so good around them, etc. But after a while, you become tolerant of the drug. And you try to take in more and more, like if I have more sex or more often, and then that's high. But then you realize that withdrawal from the drug actually causes pain. So people stay in relationships, not because they have the high of first love or dating. They stay because losing the person would hurt so much. Yeah. So it's exactly the same model in the brain. as becoming a.
Oh, so much there to unpack, but we don't have time because I know you've got to race off. If we could wrap up now, Dr. Wendy, what I like to do in these podcasts is give some tangible takeaways that people can apply, some tips. If you've got 3 to 5, I know you had a lot in your recent podcast. I think if you can just regurgitate some of those, it'd be great as well. You talked about exes showing up in people's lives, I think was fascinating now, and how to navigate that.
Well, yeah, people looking back in the past with rose-colored glasses, because what they really want to capture is the feelings they had at the time, because they're feeling so sad. So a lot of exes are reaching out to people from a long time ago. And so don't raise your hopes. And actually, you probably shouldn't be talking to your exes if you're married, etc. Here's a couple tips. Whether you're living in your house with family members or a lover, people are pleasure seekers. So if you think you're going to get them to behave in a certain way through criticism or punishment or the silent treatment, it never works. It just makes them angrier. Catch them being good. Make a pledge to yourself every day that whether it's your children or your partner, that every day you're going to catch them being good and you're going to verbalize it. And the big reason is because water what you want to grow, not the weeds. Their brain will think, oh, you think I was good for clearing the table? Wait till I show you tomorrow what I can do to get some love, right? But secondly, it reminds your own brain why you're there and keeps you in a better mood. That's the first thing. Catch them being good every single day. Second thing is forgive. And when you finish forgiving, forgive some more. And after that, forgive some more. This is no time to judge anybody. We come into this world with a set of neurochemistry designed to respond to stress. We all have an inherited stress response. This is not normal. This is not how your relationship is going to be forever. So you need to cut your partner some slack. Don't put a lot of weight in your exes. And I do want to say one thing is that a lot of research on long-term relationships has shown that the ones that work the best and stay together the longest always create something together. The obvious is having children together, but the couples who enter into a home remodel that never, ever, ever gets finished, because then their relationship would be over. It's like they're always working on this home, or they're building a business together, or they're building a charity together.
I hope my sister's watching this right now. Yep.
And so I think people need to come up with a quarantine project. So for instance, my brother and his wife in Canada, they're doing a bathroom remodel on their own, together. The tile, plumbing, they're watching YouTube videos, it is their project, right? And that's their quarantine project. So whatever it is, come up with something where both of you can make a contribution to it, because then you're going to have this sort of solidarity between the two of you that you've accomplished this together. I think that's really important.
Fabulous. Some wonderful tips for our audience. Thank you so much. Dr. Wendy Walsh, well, I'm going to let you run along now. It's always mind-blowing speaking with you. Thank you. And I feel like this is a part 1. If we can lock you down for a part 2 at some stage again. If this thing...
You use the word lockdown. I'm not going anywhere.
Perfect. All right. I'll hold you to that. Thank you again, Dr. Wendy Walsh. Have a wonderful day. And last question, how can we support you?
Just subscribe to my podcast, Mating Matters, wherever you listen to your podcasts. I think we have about 45 episodes now. We have people listening from all around the world. It's really exciting. Also, I just want to let everybody know that I, since quarantine started, have been doing a live stream on all my social media at 6 p.m. Pacific time every Wednesday. So think Wednesdays with Wendy to help you remember. Every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. East Coast time. But I'm finding people from Hong Kong, Australia, Bogota, all over coming on the live stream and putting your comments. So I use a streaming platform that puts it out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. It's everywhere. And my handle everywhere is the same, at Dr. Wendy Walsh. That's just at Dr. Wendy Walsh, W-A-L-S-H.
Great. We'll have those links as well in the notes and on top of this. So I was on your live last week. They're wonderful. That's what I love about you, Wendy, as well. You share and the value you give, and you're so accessible to people. So you want to create these ways that people can interact with you and ask questions. Same with your podcast as well. You have many episodes where listeners can phone in and ask questions, and you actually interview just regular people, which is really refreshing and nice. So thanks again, Dr. Wendy Walsh. You're
Thanks,
amazing.
Mark. Have a good day.
You too. Well, there you have it, folks. Dr. Wendy Walsh never ceases to blow my mind, and I'm sure she did for you today as well. I could just listen to that woman all day. In fact, sometimes I do. I listen to her podcast and just binge listen. Mating Matters. Don't forget to subscribe as well, and you will do the same. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on this all-important topic of connection and human relationships. And don't forget, download your copy of the Sur-thrival guide right now. It's free for you. And make sure you listen to and watch the other episodes of the Sur-thrival guide. And there's many more to come as well to help us surthrive during this pandemic. Thanks again for joining us.